Hi, this will be a commentary version of the Driving is Hard and a percent speedrun, where we will explain each of the different skips and mechanics. If you'd like to see a version without commentary, you can check the video description below. With that being said, let's get started. At the very beginning of the run, we will turn left and completely ignore the intended route. We'll simply drive through the water up to the point where we see the side of this mountain, which conveniently has a slope for us to drive up. This is what is known as a wall ride, but we'll see much more extreme versions of that later on. The next mechanic uses the parachute. If you've played the game, I'm sure you're familiar with it. The way it works is it will deploy zero 0.7 seconds after you technically begin to fall, and it will remain active again for 0 0.7 seconds while touching the ground. If you jump within that time period, you can do what is known as a bunny hop. Uh, these few skips that you see are just a matter of building enough speed and height that you can just jump over the majority of the intended route. And then of course moving up to the trampoline, we just position ourselves in a way that we can aim towards the tree and then begin climbing up it. The wall ride mechanic is a bit of a complicated one, which I'll not really be able to explain too much. I can try and create a separate video of that if you'd like to know more about it, but in general, all you should know is it's not a simple case of just driving up the wall. Here with this jump, you see that I begin to spin my car. I'll do it again here. And the reason for this is because it actually prevents your car from doing a front flip or a back flip. So it will essentially keep the axis of the car the same. So again, we're just pulling off another wall ride. This is a much more extreme version where it is a 90-degree angle, and there are actually some bends in the wood as well. So we have to drive in specific spots to avoid that, or we would lose our grip. Another big skip here where we jump over to this ladder and begin climbing it. We'll pull another wall ride here, and this is probably one of the most complicated skips in the game, because not only do you use the wall ride mechanic, but you have very little room to do it. You can simply fall off on the left side, or if you're too far right, you can hit one of those planks connecting the ladder on each side. Again, another wall ride. We have to drive diagonally to avoid bends in the wood, and we essentially skip the entirety of the treehouse. There isn't too much going on here, so I'll let the run play out. Coming up next, we do have another slight wall ride. It's not a 90-degree angle, so it is a bit easier to pull off. But we're essentially making our way up to the train, which we will actually get hit by in order to quickly send ourselves over to the trampoline. So we kind of fall off to the side here, but it doesn't really matter too much since we will be waiting for the train either way. You can simply drive across the train track as well, but usually it's faster to get hit by the train, and it's actually good if you can deploy your parachute as well, because taking the trampoline jump with the parachute out is much quicker than simply jumping with it and then waiting for the parachute to deploy from falling. Here we just do a large jump to the mines to intentionally deploy our parachute, and then we simply jump over everything. Now we will line ourselves up with the large mine to simply send ourselves exploding upwards so that we can skip the red light, green light mechanic. Next, we're going to intentionally jump here so that our parachute will deploy. It looks slow, but the reason we do this is because the parachute gives us control of the car while we are in the air, and we can use that to go over towards one of the pipes and get a jump reset, and we essentially skip an entire pipe. There's not too much going on in the container section. It's just a lot of precise driving. There is one big skip here, which again will then skip over towards the right hand side. But it's just a lot of precise driving. A lot of people struggle in this area, and it is a bit complicated in the speedrun as well, but it actually becomes one of the easier areas in this the speedrun compared to the casual playthrough. We're pretty much going to skip this entire section as well. We simply line ourselves up, and while the elevator is bringing us up, we can jump and use that momentum to skip to the final elevator. At the top of the elevator, we are going to jump and hold that jump so that we can deploy the parachute. And we'll use that to try and jump over to the next section. I do mess up a little bit here, so we end up spending a bit more time than usual. But we're going to skip over to the section where we can wall ride up to the next fan. Usually we would try and jump over to the left fan, which would be quicker, but I don't quite get the lineup, so it ends up being a bit slower. Where typically we would be able to skip all of these pipes and we wouldn't have to drive up it at all. Then of course we have the infamous 1 minute auto scroller, which everybody loves. It actually does give us a bit of a breather here, so in some ways I can appreciate it. This run can definitely see a sub 16 in the future. It just needs to essentially include every single skip in the run and just be consistent. I don't actually go for every single skip in this run. There is one at the ice section a bit later, which is quite risky. It's an instant run killer if you don't make it, and it again is either the hardest or second hardest skip in the run. So I end up not going for that, just to guarantee the sub 17 in this run, but it will be included in future runs. Next up, we do have a slight skip, which unfortunately I don't think I make. You've probably done this in your casual playthrough, where you simply just end up landing on this little platform. Ideally, we want to actually get on top of this building, and we'll be able to skip a little bit of this. But unfortunately I don't quite make it, so we end up driving through here, and this is again a minor skip over the casual playthrough. And this is essentially where we would land if we managed to land on top of the building earlier on. Next up, we're going to turn the car here and jump over to this building, where we will do a small wall ride over to the trampoline. Your car kind of gets stuck in between the building, and it can be a bit complicated to get the car turned around for this, but thankfully it doesn't take us too long here. We do a bit of a precise setup on this trampoline so that we can get sent directly up, and we do touch the wheel against the road so that we can get that jump reset, and that means we can just do an extra jump and then securely land on the highway. There's a skip here, which is pretty tough to pull off as well. It doesn't save too much time, but if you can manage to drive up the side of this and clip your wheel against the highway, you can land on top of that, but it's as simple as just driving over here and climbing up this wall, so it doesn't save too much time. Next up, we have the rotating houses. This is pretty standard. There's not really much you can do here. I have practiced trying to bunny hop over this section, but I haven't really found a good way of being able to pull it off. Because of the rotating houses, it kind of just kills your momentum in a lot of cases, so I haven't found a faster way of doing it currently. Here we again do another wall ride. This is actually much faster than going up the intended way, because if you go the intended way, you can't actually jump while going up, which jumping, of course, does give you that speed boost that you're seeing. There is some potential that you could bunny hop up this section, but I don't think it would actually be faster. If you get a nice enough transition on the snow, you can actually still maintain a decent bit of speed. So we're coming up to another large skip here. We're not going to take the intended route coming up to this ice ramp. We're actually going to take the larger ramp over towards the trampoline. So this is a pretty specific skip that can be, again, somewhat hard to pull off. You need to jump right at the beginning of the ramp and at the end, which will give you a jump reset as well, and we can easily make it over. This trampoline skip is also quite precise. You need to tap yourself gently forwards so that you can line yourself up with this rock, and once the wheel touches it, you'll get a jump reset, which allows you to skip the entire way up here. So this next section is where the skip is that I'm not going to take. Coming up to this next turn, you can actually use the slope right up here to jump over to those rocks that you can see there, but because of the slippery surface, it's a very difficult skip to pull off. Here we'll take advantage of some more bunny hops. The snowmen, of course, you do not want to touch because they will explode. However, there actually is a skip using one of them, which I don't think I managed to pull off. But you can jump right up here, which just save 5 to 10 seconds. But even if you mess it up, you can use that parachute to bunny hop all the way up. We will, of course, take the much shorter and steeper ramp. We jump at the beginning of it, which gives us enough momentum to reach the top, and if we pull it off correctly, we can jump all the way up to the next section. If you're familiar with Trackmania and familiar with the khaki, we try and do our own version of it in this speedrun. Unfortunately, I don't pull it off, but the goal here is to bounce off of the fence, and it essentially flings you up in the air, which will help you skip a lot of this. It's not too much faster, but again, if you pull it off cleanly, all time save matters at the end of the day. We are now making our way over to another trampoline. So there is a much easier version of this, but of course we're going for the fastest version. So we're trying to reach all the way up to this wall, which we can drive up and make our way up over here. Ideally, you want enough height and speed to keep that parachute, and we would bunny hop all over this section and these next platforms as well, but because I didn't keep it, unfortunately just have to do it the regular way. If you get enough speed and height here, you can skip pretty much all the way to the final platform, but unfortunately I don't get a good jump, so I end up having to do it the normal way. Pretty large skip here where we aim directly for the crystals, and we can jump over to the side here. Normally you'd drive under those rocks, but of course this saves a lot of time. We again use the crystals to be able to reach this wall, which we can drive up the side of and do a fairly small skip. Next up, the railways. Typically you would jump over a lot of these sections just to try and save time. You're not only skipping a lot of the intended path, but jumping past the minecarts as well. Up next we do have a very large skip though, so I'll go over to the side here, not because I just want to avoid the minecarts, but I'm actually setting up for a large skip here, which we're going to use bunny hops for. Normally you can't drive on the surface because it's very slippy, and you simply just cannot drive over it because you don't have enough control, but like I said earlier in the run, as long as you're jumping within 0.7 seconds of touching the ground, you can maintain the parachute. And although we can't normally drive on the surface, it doesn't really matter if you're not touching the surface for very long. And we skip all the way to the end. At this point, there's only one more skip in the run, but thanks very much for watching. If you'd like any more further clarification on any mechanics or skips, feel free to let me know, and I'll be happy to go over those in more detail. But thanks for watching the run. If you haven't speedrun this game or played the game, I would highly recommend it. The devs are fantastic people who support the speedrunning community. They've created custom trophies for some speedrunning events that have happened so far, and they've even created cosmetics for a lot of different content creators and speedrunners as well. So definitely give the devs a lot of love. Play the game if you haven't, and again, thanks very much for watching the video. Coming up now to the last skip. I always knew these were here kind of intended. The devs kind of just put different stuff throughout the run, not really knowing if it would be possible or not. Especially since these platforms kind of aren't in the correct spots right away. You have to drive up and let them spawn. But thankfully, they do trigger whenever we jump across that gap.